Coming from the pod to record another episode of Off the Cuff. This week we're lucky enough to have Vicky Harding. Vicky is the head of Repton Prep, a public school in Derbyshire which was crowned the happiest boarding school in 2022. Previous to this, she was Director of Music at Garden House in London and Dragon School in Oxford, where she brought her vast experience as a professional musician into the classroom. Welcome, Vicky.
Thank you, Fiona. It's really lovely to be on the podcast today.
Thank you very much. So firstly, can you tell us a bit about your career and how you ended up as head of Repton Prep?
Absolutely. I went to Edinburgh University and studied music, and I was very fortunate to have 4 fabulous years there, which were filled with lots of wonderful music making opportunities and friendships. And I was awarded prizes to go on to study at the Royal Academy of Music as well in London after that for 2 years. And it was really during that time that I started teaching, and it was mostly actually one-to-one lessons, and absolutely loved it. And I suppose it built on my experiences from university, where I did music in the community as one of my courses, and that meant going into schools, working with children and putting that power of music at the forefront, and I loved all of that. So then when I was able to teach music in the classroom, and I was very lucky, it snowballed from there. You mentioned I was Director of Music at Garden House in London, and then moved on to the same role at the Dragon. And that was a much bigger position because there were over 70 staff in my music department and over 1,000 music lessons happening a week. So that's when I got the bug for management, senior leadership, loving working with people. And that's where everything came on from there. And I became a deputy head and then a head.
Excellent. And what first got you into music?
So I have to attribute that to my mum, who was very keen for me to be able to play the piano for an enjoyment at an early age. And it kind of grew from there. I think she became obsessed with it when I worked hard and practiced regularly. And I suppose I found I was quite good at it. It was definitely that piano was my thing, because I actually also took up the flute, and have to admit that I really found it incredibly difficult and very exposing, and I hated being an instrumentalist. So piano was where my passion really was, and I suppose having the piano, maybe it was hiding behind the piano, I don't know, but I absolutely loved playing the piano. And then I was awarded an organ scholarship when I went to Leeds Girls High School, and I kind of loved that because obviously the organ playing world is quite male dominated, and it felt quite pleasing to be a woman playing the organ at school. But I think one of the biggest things that I loved about music, and I really wanted to talk about, was about the fact that my mum took me to concerts and live performances as a teenager. And obviously, I have to admit, I didn't appreciate them at the time, but they have really instilled a massive respect in me for professional musicians. And now I absolutely love listening to music. And one of the first things I did when I moved to London was to buy a really cheap seat in the Gods at the Royal Opera House and see an opera by Puccini on my own. And I think that was a massive gift that my mum gave me, of being able to really enjoy and appreciate live music and the creative arts.
And my next question is, what is your favourite part of the creative process?
Well, I'm very lucky because I am a good sight reader, which has also got me out of lots of pickles when I haven't perhaps done as much practice as I should have done. And we'll all be familiar with that. But I really enjoy committing them into your hands and your body, so that if you do become nervous in a performance, your fingers take over and still do their thing. And it buys you a bit of time whilst you're having a wobble, and you can still carry on with it due to muscle memory, which I think is an incredible thing. I can't memorize music at all, which I find incredibly frustrating. And I also don't find improvisation very easy either. And certainly the improvisation has been something that's been hard, especially doing music in the community projects. And I've often been booked as kind of the pianist who plays the written notes, and they'd have an improv person separately, because they're kind of two very different disciplines. But I also love learning about the composers behind the music and the story behind the compositions. And I've had lots of experience collaborating with different people and seeing the power of music in people's lives. So that's working with others, I think, is a big part of that process.
And how do you choose who to collaborate with?
Well, I really think that one of my passions is for accompanying singers. And actually, when I went to the Royal Academy, I focused on piano accompaniment. There was a specific course for it. And there's something fantastic about working with voices, and I suppose that you have the kind of text of the songs as well, and you can kind of get into a meaning behind it, the story behind the composer. Obviously lots of the romantic music is really lovely to delve into from that aspect. But I think I probably discovered I wouldn't get a job as a professional repetiteur because my accent for languages, shall we say, isn't up to scratch. And one of the most traumatic moments at the Royal Academy was having to sing an aria in Italian, but I would say it's probably in Yorkshire Italian. And having to sing that, I just found really, really horrific. And so I think if you're going to work with singers, you've got to have that knack for languages, the ability to coach them through all of those. And so I think that was probably the time when I thought the teaching is much more appealing.
And what's your most powerful concert experience?
I think that's a tricky one because there's lots of different varying experiences. And I said I like working with others and sharing the musical experience. Two probably stand out, both when I was actually at university. One was when we used to go out to Croatia in the summer holidays and put on projects with children affected by war. And that was really, really powerful because you started the week with nothing. You just kind of met all these people and there was no music. And then throughout the weeks, we brought things together, created music, and then put on a performance at the end. And working with the Pavarotti Music Centre from Bosnia and then students from university, that was pretty amazing, and seeing the impact on the children. And also I was very lucky to be president and musical director of Edinburgh University Footlights Society, which was a really, really good fun experience, taught me lots of things, and I was able to be involved in performance as part of the Fringe Festival, which I think is really a great thing to have done as well.
Absolutely, that's certainly quite an experience. And when you were doing a performance, did you have a specific routine before you went onto the stage?
It's probably not the best routine to have, but mine was always to be a bit last minute because I hate sitting around waiting to perform. So keeping busy is really important to me because otherwise I start going through everything in my mind. So I used to have somebody I performed with a lot and used to joke with him about forgetting something and driving back to Yorkshire or whatever to collect it last minute just so I could rock out right at the end and get on with it. So I think not having to hang around too much is what appeals to me in that situation.
What was your proudest accomplishment as a musician?
I think I've probably got two. One is the Music in the Community course as part of my degree, and mentioned talking about going out and doing projects with children in different schools, whether it was SEND pupils or schools where music wasn't part of their agenda normally. And so it was really powerful to be able to take music in. So I love doing that. And we had some fantastic experiences and really memorable ones. Also, when I was at Garden House, we put on concerts at the Cadogan Hall annually, which raised a lot of money for charity. And they were really fantastic, exciting drumming events where it was mass participation. And I felt really proud of being able to start that from scratch. And it still carries on to this day. And I suppose I also have to drop in there, playing at Buckingham Palace was also a highlight. And that was post being at Edinburgh University and linked to my role there. So that was a real treat a couple of times too.
And how did that come about?
That was because I was organ scholar and so had represented the school, and there were links with Edinburgh, the Duke of Edinburgh, of course, and then the university hosting a dinner at Buckingham Palace. And so they knew I'd moved to London, they'd funded some of my place, and so I think it was linked to that. But I just loved turning up in my Ford Ka to Buckingham Palace. I just thought that was really, really great at the time, and just driving in and parking, quite surreal, really.
One of those things you can't easily forget. And that really does show, obviously, how creative industries at that high level are highly competitive. Did you ever have to cope with rejection? How did it make you stronger?
Oh, absolutely. And I think everyone has to cope with rejection at some point in some capacity. And therefore, being quite tough and believing in yourself is really, really important, but also knowing your own boundaries and what works for you. And that's been all the way through my life. Even putting yourself forward for a competition when you're at school, somebody who's going to win, somebody who isn't, and you've still got to move forward and try and be better. And rejection's always hard to take. But another thing that my mum very much instilled into me from an early age is that no one is irreplaceable. And I think that's quite a tough lesson, but a very good one to remember, because there's always someone who is moving forwards in the same direction, can take over, and we've all got to deal with failure, and we all strive to do our best. We have to accept our losses. I talk to the children about that a lot in assembly, so I certainly have to practice what I preach. But I also say to them, it never stops, does it? As you're going through your life, you're constantly learning, constantly making choices, and should really constantly be trying to improve and get better. And so that resilience piece is always really, really important. And actually at our sports dinner recently, we had someone from the FA talking, Reese Long, and he was absolutely brilliant with the pupils, talking about the resilience of sports people and how people right at the top of their game aren't always picked, and it's how they move forward from that.
And what is one of your hidden talents?
That's pretty tough. I don't want to say I don't have time for hidden talents, but I suppose something I'm proud of was completing 4 marathons, and I've done 13 half marathons as well for charity. And at the time, I was absolutely consumed with the competitive spirit, the running bug. I was competitive with myself for times that I wanted. And so I suppose being that driven and carving out that amount of time to train for a marathon, I think has to be a bit of a talent for anybody who does it, because it's a big commitment, but very rewarding. Now I have settled and I'm just happy with doing my plod around and doing a standard 4 or 5 mile run for pleasure. But it was definitely a big bug at the time.
Coming back to your work in the education sector, males traditionally do dominate at the higher ranks. How easy do you find it to move up in your career?
I think in my career in particular, the hardest change was actually moving from being a director of music into a head, rather than anything related to gender, which I suppose is a great thing to be able to say. It was very much that move out of being musical, where people would see your CV and say, well, we're not looking for a music teacher when you're applying for a deputy headship or a headship even. Both of those were said at the time when I was moving out of the Dragon. And actually I was really lucky that my first job in a senior management position, I was appointed by a head who'd done exactly the same journey. So he was also a musician who'd moved into headship. So that was a great collaboration. I was really appreciative of that. I think also one of the hardest things actually was working in London with the north-south divide, and actually being from Yorkshire was sometimes criticised, and my accent, more than being female. So that's quite an interesting take on it, I think.
And what is your approach to leadership, and how do you inspire and motivate your team?
Well, I very much hope that I'm somebody who recognises everybody's strengths and that everybody's part of the team. Certainly at Repton, I couldn't do my job without every single member of staff who contributes in whatever role in the school. So I really do try to lead a fair, consistent, inclusive environment where other people feel involved in school life and in decision making. One of the hardest things about being a senior leader is knowing that you're not always going to be liked by everybody, especially when you spend your time genuinely trying to do the best for everyone. And sometimes that does mean making unpopular choices. But I think, as I said previously, that willingness to grow and reflect on yourself is appreciated by other people too, because again, try to practice what I say to the pupils. But I hope that that collaboration, that respect for one another and what everybody does in an organisation is what comes through as a leader.
And what are your biggest priorities for the school over the next 3 years?
I think probably embedding the changes that have been made over the last 3 years, because I think when you come in as a head, you want to drive forward change. And I was very lucky that the staff at Repton were really keen for that to happen. But I think also there's a point where you have to say that building on good practice is key as well. And it's not all about exciting changes all the time. And we've been really lucky. We've had lots of building updates, a new media suite, introduction of academic enrichment, project qualifications, to name a few. So I think embedding all those in what we offer, but also when I really think about it, I'm really proud, even though it's not something that I organise, but our dinner and debate programme is fantastic at school. So that culture of oracy is something that we're really looking to grow as children go all the way through the school, so that they feel confident talking, speaking. It doesn't come naturally to everybody, but having those increased opportunities is a real gift. When I think about this, I know it comes back to music slightly, but every child at Repton Prep from nursery upwards has the opportunity to perform on stage all the way through the year, whether it's through a drama performance, a musical performance, whether it's in assembly. So there's so many opportunities, and I'm always amazed at how they just do it and they don't think about it. And that's because they've had that opportunity all the way through. So I think doing that with their speaking and oracy as well will be really, really important.
We've just come back from half term. So what are any traditions or superstitions you have for the first day of school in order to set the tone?
Probably getting an early night, which is always difficult and backfires, because as much as we say don't lose the routine in the holidays, you inevitably do, and that's a treat of not having those set timings when it is the holidays. But I think an early bed, even though the mind starts racing in the middle of the night. And as you know, my shoe collection is very important to me. So having my outfit and shoes laid out the night before, so no decisions have to be made in the morning, is very helpful.
And what piece of information or advice that you won't find in the prospectus would you give to any new parents who are considering sending their children to the school?
What we always say is come and visit the site for yourself, because you can look at all the brochures, all the literature, and see hopefully fantastic things, but it's actually that feel as soon as you walk through the door in person, and that connection that you get between your family and the school that I think is the most important. You want to check that what a school says they do actually happens in practice, and so that's why we don't put on the all singing, all dancing open mornings. An open morning is an opportunity to come and look around a normal day at school on a Saturday, and we always encourage families to follow up with a personal one-to-one tour as well. I always say, please ask the children, please ask the staff any questions, get a feel for it. And we just want people to have that authentic and unfiltered experience when they come here, so that they can see if that connection's right for them, because it really is a fit both ways, choosing the right school.
Talking about a fit, many students at the prep go on to Repton School down the road. How do you work with the senior school to prepare students for the next stage of their education?
Well, we're very lucky as a through school, because it means that the children can have a seamless transition to the senior school. And actually that begins very early with that familiarisation process. From year 6 upwards, we have experience days now where children go down as a year group and they spend a day there, and that builds each year in year 6, 7, and they have 2 days in year 8 where they can go and meet different staff, have experiences of subjects that they might not study at the prep. So that's really exciting and kind of piques their interest with things that they'll be able to do, and use the fantastic facilities down the road as well. So I think getting to know the routines, the structures, the people, the layout as well, and coming up the year 8 have a transition day, and they get to have a Q&A with some of the children who moved up last year. And in our boarding community, the year 9 boarders return in the summer term each year to see our current boarders, and that's another one. And with the new house allocation this year, all the house parents have come up to the prep for lunch with the pupils and spent some time with the children who are going into their houses next year. And as staff, we have lots of discussions, enhanced transitions and meetings to make that as seamless as possible. We're really proud of the fact we're one big family, and there are just so many opportunities for collaboration across the 2 sites, and it doesn't just link to that transition, it's about the whole experience across all the subjects. So musical opportunities, going to see drama productions at the senior school. I think that's really exciting to have that experience of the older children who our prep pupils really look up to, and especially if they're ones that have been at the prep and then they see them on stage or doing something fantastic. It's absolutely inspirational and really exciting.
But of course, not all children fit the same mould, especially those with special educational needs. They often need more help to ensure parity in education and to access education. How do you cater for diverse learning needs?
We have a learning enhancement department, which is a real hive of activity for children. And obviously the structure of that varies as you move through the school, appropriate to the age. From year 5 upwards, subject specialist teachers for every single lesson. And so the feel of the school is very different to that in the lower years. However, knowing every child as an individual is really important. And I think that's where I'm really lucky, because I work with a very talented and committed team of staff at Repton Prep, and we have lots of individual learning programs, an inclusive environment, and that's in our approach, which is everything is underpinned by kindness. I think if you ask any child, they would say that that is my constant mantra in assemblies. But we really want to create that sense of belonging for all at Repton Prep, and we're lucky because we've got a diverse community here and lots of international borders, and that community is really, really important. We definitely feel it's a great honour to be a part of a child's education and their development. And we all think back to people we loved and were inspirational when we were at school, and we just very much hope that we can be that special person in somebody's life and have that impact, because it's so exciting and it's a very, very privileged position to be in.
As you say, education does often underpin people's life choices, but what issue in education doesn't get the attention it should?
Well, I think I'd have to say, as a former director of music, I think the issue at the moment is the decline of pupils taking up music lessons and those extras that are all the creative skills that employers say that they need. And we all know that the jobs are changing, the market's changing, we need creative thinkers who can think outside the box, but the opportunities for children to engage with those activities are kind of in a decline. I mean, my husband and I were just talking about that last night, because he's a professional musician, and it's not just in schools, in the music world in London, the number of people in orchestras and performers is declining. So I think looking into that and how we can engage children in those opportunities that enrich and ensure a balanced approach to education is really, really important.
And finally, if you could pass on any wisdom on being in education, what would it be?
Well, I love being in education because I get to work with people and fantastic pupils who inspire me every day, because what I love is that how you think about something, a child can think about in a completely different way, which is really, really exciting. But I think one question we should be considering is about life has moved on and is much more modern, and I think the education system probably needs to move on, and we need to think about how we're ensuring that the children are embracing the world that they're living in. And by spending a day in the life of a child, people would find extraordinary in the fact that they do so many things, and we actually have so many expectations on them. And I think what's really exciting is that they rise to those expectations every day and exceed them. And I suppose that's what keeps us all really buzzing in education.
Vicky, thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. It has been most interesting to hear about how important it is to set the tone early in a child's education to ensure they can discover their own talents and step successfully onwards into their own individual destiny. Thank you to the listeners who've hopefully enjoyed the show as much as we've enjoyed making it. If you have any questions regarding the podcast, please feel free to comment. If you think it's worth coming back, please like and subscribe. If you feel you need something to tide you over to the next podcast, please buy my book Party Games on Amazon. And on that note, I'll see you next time. Have a good week, one and all.